David's world shattered the day Elizabeth disappeared. It had been an ordinary morning, a quiet breakfast, the gentle hum of conversation in their small kitchen, and a lingering kiss goodbye as she left for work. Yet, that same evening, David returned home to a silence so profound it echoed through every corner of the house. Elizabeth was not there. Initially, disbelief settled over him like a thick fog. She had always been punctual, her smile a constant beacon of warmth. Now, her absence created an unsettling void. In the days that followed, David combed every room and retraced every step they'd taken together. The police were called, a missing person report was filed, and community bulletins plastered every lamppost in town bore her face. The investigation unfolded slowly. David's friends and neighbors offered condolences, their voices soft with sympathy. But behind their words lay an undercurrent of pity that he could neither accept nor understand. How does one reconcile a love so deep with the gaping wound of loss? As the weeks turned into months, David's desperation evolved. Every creak of the floorboard in the dead of night, every unexpected ring of the telephone sparked hope. A fleeting moment when he believed Elizabeth might walk through the door, arms open, apologizing for the inexplicable absence. He scoured every possibility, old acquaintances, favorite coffee shops, even the park bench where they had once shared a secret laugh. Yet each search ended in the same heart-wrenching conclusion. Elizabeth was gone. Even the police began to suspect that perhaps her disappearance was voluntary, a decision made in secret. But David couldn't fathom the idea. Their marriage, though not without its trials, was built on love, trust, and a mutual promise of commitment. David clung to memories. The sound of Elizabeth's laugh, the glimmer in her eyes when she spoke of their future, the gentle reassurance of her touch. These memories wove themselves into every moment of his waking hours, a constant reminder of what was lost. In his solitude, David found himself wrestling with a cascade of emotions, grief, anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Yet beneath these tumultuous feelings lay a quiet resolve. He promised himself that he would not let despair dictate his every action. Instead, he would channel his anguish into a relentless search for answers, for any clue that might reveal the fate of the woman he loved so dearly. Unbeknownst to him, this journey would not only unearth painful truths, but also transform the very core of his understanding of love and sacrifice. His quest was just beginning, and every step he took was laced with equal parts hope and heartache. In the days following Elizabeth's disappearance, David's life morphed into a surreal blend of hope and despair. Every moment was colored by the absence of her presence. The house, once filled with laughter and soft conversations, now echoed with silence. David's days began with the search for traces of her, small signs that she might have been somewhere, anywhere, within reach. In his mind, every locked door, every unopened letter, whispered secrets of a life that continued without her. David's mornings were spent poring over photographs, reviewing old videos of happier times. He would trace his fingers over the glossy images of their wedding day, the vacations by the sea, and the quiet evenings spent at home. Each snapshot was a painful reminder of the void that had been left behind. Even as his body moved through the motions of daily life, his heart remained tethered to that singular moment of loss, a moment that refused to fade into memory. Driven by an unyielding desire for closure, David began to meticulously retrace Elizabeth's last known steps. He visited her workplace, asked colleagues about her recent behavior, and combed through her personal belongings for any hidden clues. His questions were met with pitying glances and half-hearted responses. Maybe she needed some time to herself, someone suggested, while another murmured, "I hope she's safe." None of these answers could ease the gnawing uncertainty that plagued him. Instead, each response only deepened the mystery. Late into the night, David found solace in writing letters to Elizabeth, a ritual that became both cathartic and excruciatingly painful. In these letters, he poured out his soul, memories of their shared dreams, confessions of secrets he had never revealed, and pleas for her to return. Though he never sent these letters, they served as a form of communication between his heart and hers, a silent hope that someday, somehow, she might hear his words and find her way back. As time slipped by, the community's support wavered. Friends visited less frequently, their eyes avoiding his, their words growing more hollow with each encounter. The media began to refer to Lizabeth's case as just another missing person story, a footnote in a larger narrative of loss and tragedy. But to David, she was the universe incarnate, and her absence was a wound that could never heal. Every unanswered phone call, every missed knock at the door, was a fresh cut in the fabric of his soul. Even as he grappled with this unrelenting grief, David sensed a strange duality in his emotions. Amid the anguish was a flicker of something else, a resolve that urged him to keep searching, to delve deeper into the labyrinth of clues. He began to compile detailed notes and maps of her known whereabouts, creating a web of connections in the hope that one strand might unravel the mystery. What started as a desperate search for a missing wife was slowly transforming into a profound journey of self-discovery. And even as the shadows of loss loomed large, David clung to a stubborn belief that somewhere, beyond the veil of uncertainty, lay the truth about Lizabeth's fate. As weeks turned into months, David's search for Lizabeth grew into a labyrinthine investigation. Every seemingly trivial detail became a potential lead, every casual remark from acquaintances an opportunity for insight. The very air in his home seemed charged with the memories of her laughter and the lingering scent of her perfume, a scent that now haunted his every thought. With an intensity that bordered on obsession, he meticulously documented every conversation, every whispered rumor that fluttered through the community like fragile, fleeting leaves in the wind. David began visiting places that held significance in their shared history. The park where they had once strolled hand in hand, the cafe where they had planned their dreams, and even the quiet corners of the city that whispered secrets of romance and loss. In these familiar settings, he searched for traces of her presence, convinced that somewhere hidden was a clue, a silent testimony to her departure. Yet every search ended with the same painful void. Each time, the hope that he might stumble upon a hint was replaced by the crushing realization that the woman he loved was slipping further away. In the midst of this relentless quest, David encountered a myriad of characters, old friends, distant relatives, even strangers, each adding a fragment to the puzzle of Lizabeth's life. There was the elderly neighbor who recalled seeing her in a burst of uncharacteristic haste, the coworker who mentioned a recent change in her demeanor, and a casual acquaintance who hinted at an unfamiliar face often seen with her. These scattered pieces of information formed a tapestry of whispers that began to paint a picture far more complex than a simple disappearance. Despite the mounting evidence suggesting something more than a mere accident or a temporary escape, David's heart clung to the hope of her return. His nights were restless, filled with dreams of reuniting, where her eyes shone with remorse and love, a stark contrast to the mounting indications of her secret life. In his solitude, he oscillated between the roles of a grieving husband and a determined investigator, driven by a profound need to reconcile the love he once knew with the unknown future that lay ahead. Yet, as he delved deeper, an unexpected clarity began to emerge. David's once blinding anguish gave way to a slow, methodical process of acceptance. He recognized that the search was not merely about finding Lizabeth. It was about understanding the reasons behind her departure, and, in some painful way, coming to terms with his own unspoken truths. In this journey of unraveling threads, he discovered that love was not a static state, but a dynamic force, capable of bending and reshaping itself in the face of adversity. Late one evening, as rain pounded against the window panes, David sat surrounded by his notes and photographs, a single thought resonating in his mind. What if Lizabeth had left not out of malice, but in search of something that even he could not provide? The realization was both shattering and liberating. It was a hypothesis that demanded further exploration, a mystery that would test the boundaries of his heart. With a resolve that surprised even himself, David decided to transform his quest into something greater than a desperate search. He vowed to pursue the truth, no matter where it led, even if that truth meant uncovering painful realities about the woman he thought he knew so well. And so, with pen in hand and heart laid bare, David began to piece together the scattered remnants of a life that once was, a life that might hold the key to understanding why Elizabeth had chosen to vanish, and what hidden depths of love and loss lay waiting on the other side of this mystery. The investigation into Elizabeth's disappearance had entered a phase where the lines between reality and illusion began to blur. David, now a man hardened by grief and fueled by an unyielding determination, found himself confronting truths he had long evaded. The community's murmurs, once brushed aside as idle gossip, now seemed to hint at a narrative more complex than a mere case of lost love. It was as if every conversation, every idle remark held the potential to peel away another layer of the mystery that enshrouded his wife's sudden absence. One chilly morning, David met with a sympathetic detective who had been assigned to the case. Over a cup of bitter coffee in a sterile, fluorescent-lit room, the detective revealed subtle inconsistencies in Elizabeth's personal life. "There are indications that she may have been leading a double life," the detective said quietly, his tone measured. The words hung in the air like a dark omen. David's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and a strange curiosity. Was it possible that the woman he had loved so dearly had hidden parts of herself from him? This revelation did not bring the anger or vindictiveness that many expected. Instead, it forced David to confront the possibility that the love they shared might have been layered with secrets he was unaware of. His mind raced as he recalled fleeting moments that, in hindsight, could have been signs: quiet phone calls in the dead of night, cryptic smiles exchanged with strangers, and an inexplicable distance that had gradually crept into their conversations. Each memory now took on new meaning, and every doubt that had once been dismissed began to solidify into a haunting truth. In the days that followed, David began to retrace Elizabeth's last known actions with an objectivity that he had never applied before. He visited places she frequented, spoke to acquaintances with a newfound detachment, and even found himself reviewing old messages and emails with a discerning eye. What he discovered was not a web of deceit designed to hurt him, but rather the desperate quest of a woman seeking something more than the confines of a life that no longer fulfilled her. Yet, amid this quiet exploration of hidden depths, David maintained an unwavering calm. Friends and family expected a man consumed by fury, a man who would demand retribution for the betrayal he had suffered. Instead, David's reaction was one of somber introspection. He was not ready to condemn Elizabeth. He only sought the truth, however painful it might be. In a twist that stunned those around him, he hired a private investigator. His intention was not to expose her secrets to the world, but rather to ensure her safety. This decision marked a turning point. It was an act of profound love, a willingness to protect the one he still cared for, despite the betrayal. As the private investigator began to gather information, David found himself oscillating between two worlds, one of lingering hope and the other of harsh reality. The investigative reports were slow to arrive, yet each new detail, each verified fact, added another piece to the puzzle of Elizabeth's new life. In the quiet moments of the night, as David sat with his thoughts, he allowed himself to wonder if this unexpected journey might ultimately lead him to closure. Was it truly love that compelled him to act so selflessly, or was it the need to understand a part of himself that had been left in the wake of her disappearance? As these questions swirled in the depths of his mind, David resolved to see this investigation through to its end. With a heavy heart but a steady determination, he braced himself for whatever revelations lay ahead, knowing that the path to truth was often paved with sorrow as much as with hope. In the midst of his search for answers, David found himself irresistibly drawn to the fragments of his shared past with Elizabeth. Late at night, when the world around him had succumbed to silence, memories would flood his mind, intimate moments that once were the foundation of their love. As he revisited old journals, faded photographs, and cherished mementos, he began to see hints of hidden pain and quiet desperation lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. There were mornings when Elizabeth had awoken with a wistful look in her eyes, as if longing for something she could never quite articulate. David, caught up in the routine of daily life, had dismissed those fleeting expressions as mere traces of tiredness. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, every smile and every tear revealed a secret narrative, one that hinted at a woman divided between duty and desire. In these quiet moments of introspection, David wondered if their love had been as complete as he had always believed, or if it had been a delicate facade, masking deeper, unspoken truths. The recollection of their early days together was bittersweet. In the tender glow of memory, Elizabeth's laughter echoed like a melody, and their shared dreams painted vivid pictures of a future filled with hope. They had walked hand in hand along sunlit paths, whispered promises beneath starry skies, and built a life that on the surface seemed impervious to the trials of time. Yet, beneath this veneer of contentment, there were subtle undercurrents of restlessness. Elizabeth's eyes, once bright with unbridled joy, had gradually taken on a distant quality, as if searching for an answer that lay just beyond her reach. David's own introspection led him to question the dynamics of their relationship. Had he been so consumed by his own routines and obligations that he had overlooked the quiet signals of discontent? Or was it that Elizabeth had been yearning for something beyond the boundaries of the life they had constructed together? As he sifted through old letters and whispered confessions exchanged in the quiet hours of the night, the puzzle of their past began to take on a new, more complex form. In the dim light of his study, David realized that his grief was not simply a reaction to her absence. It was also a mourning for the parts of Elizabeth he had never truly known. Each memory was a reminder of moments when she had hinted at a world beyond their shared reality, a world where her spirit could roam free, unburdened by expectation. This realization was both agonizing and liberating. It offered no simple answers, only the understanding that love is multifaceted, filled with both beauty and sorrow. In this journey down memory lane, David began to see his decision to protect Elizabeth, even from afar, as an acknowledgement of the complexity of human emotion. His actions were no longer driven solely by heartbreak. They were an embrace of a deeper truth, that sometimes the most profound act of love is to let go, to safeguard the happiness of another, even if it means sacrificing one's own desires. With every page turned and every memory relived, David inched closer to accepting that the woman he had loved so deeply was embarking on a path of self-discovery, one that might ultimately lead her away from him. And in that acceptance lay the bittersweet hope that perhaps, in honoring her choice, he might also find a measure of redemption for himself. As autumn gave way to the biting chill of winter, David's investigation began to uncover threads of evidence that hinted at a life Elizabeth had constructed without him. A chance encounter with a neighbor, an offhand comment from a shopkeeper, and the odd, hurried message from an old friend all converged to form a mosaic of hints that something was amiss. In the soft, fading light of dusk, David started piecing together a timeline, a series of subtle, almost imperceptible clues that pointed to a deliberate, carefully orchestrated departure. It was during one of these quiet evenings that David found an envelope tucked away in the back of a forgotten drawer. The envelope contained a single, cryptic note written in a delicate hand. The message was brief and enigmatic, hinting at a secret life that Elizabeth had begun to lead. The words, ambiguous yet weighted with urgency, sent a chill down David's spine. They spoke of new beginnings and old scars, of journeys embarked upon for reasons that could only be understood by those brave enough to seek the truth behind their own hidden depths. This unexpected discovery stirred within him a mix of dread and reluctant fascination. Determined to unravel this mystery, David began retracing Elizabeth's steps with the care of a detective and the tenderness of a husband who still cared. He reached out to her closest friends and acquaintances, listening intently as they recounted the last moments they had seen her. One friend recalled a fleeting glimpse of her smiling at a man whose name remained unspoken, while another mentioned a change in her behavior, a newfound restlessness that had taken hold in recent months. Each conversation, though seemingly insignificant on its own, contributed to a growing narrative of a woman in search of something beyond the familiar confines of her past. In the quiet solitude of his living room, with the wind howling outside and the memories of happier times flickering in his mind, David allowed himself to entertain the unthinkable possibility that Elizabeth had not been lost to him by fate, but had chosen a different path, one that led her away from the love they once shared. The thought was painful, yet it held a certain inevitability. After all, life was a series of choices, and sometimes the hardest decisions were the ones made in silence. As David sifted through the evidence, he began to see that the clues were not a map to a crime, but rather a testament to a personal transformation. They were indicators of a woman who had discovered a part of herself that had been suppressed for too long. And rather than inciting anger, these discoveries evoked in David a profound empathy, a recognition that love, in all its complexities, could not be confined to the boundaries of one shared life. With each passing day, the investigation took on an air of bittersweet inevitability. David enlisted the help of a trusted private investigator, not with the aim of unmasking a betrayal, but with the hope of ensuring that Elizabeth was safe. The investigators' early findings painted a picture of a woman who had embraced a new identity, one that was both mysterious and alluring. Even as the evidence mounted, David's resolve remained unshaken. His mission was no longer about reclaiming what he had lost. It was about honoring her choice, even if it meant accepting a reality he never imagined. In the twilight of that long, reflective day, David sat by the window and watched the falling leaves. Each leaf was a silent testament to change, a reminder that endings could also be beginnings. As the first snowflakes began to descend, he made a silent vow to pursue the truth, no matter how painful or unexpected it might be, and to let love guide him through the darkness of uncertainty. In the stark light of a cold winter day, David found himself stepping out of the confines of his isolated grief into the bustling, indifferent world beyond. With each determined step, he resolved to confront the growing mystery of Elizabeth's secret life. It was during one of these solitary walks that fate intervened in the form of a stranger, a woman with eyes that seemed to hold a universe of secrets. She approached David with an air of cautious curiosity, and in that moment, he sensed that she was not merely an ordinary passerby. The woman introduced herself as Mary Ann, a friend of a friend who had once known Elizabeth in a context far removed from the domestic tranquility David remembered. Mary Ann's manner was gentle yet guarded, as if each word was weighed with care before it was allowed to leave her lips. Over a shared cup of hot coffee in a quiet, dimly lit cafe, she recounted fragments of conversations and subtle hints that Elizabeth had confided in her. Mary Ann spoke of dreams and disillusionments, of moments when Elizabeth's eyes had shone with the brilliance of hidden aspirations. Yet there was also an undercurrent of sorrow, a loneliness that resonated with David's own heartache. As Mary Ann described Elizabeth's new acquaintances and the small, yet significant changes in her behavior, David listened with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. He learned that Elizabeth had not simply run away. She had sought refuge in a world that offered her both liberation and the bittersweet promise of reinvention. Mary Ann hinted at a name, a man who had captured Elizabeth's attention, a man whose presence seemed to symbolize both danger and possibility. This mysterious figure was described as enigmatic, possessing a charm that both enticed and troubled those who encountered him. The conversation took on a reflective tone, as Mary Ann spoke not only of Elizabeth's outward transformation, but also of the inner journey she had embarked upon. It was clear that Elizabeth had been wrestling with deep personal demons, past regrets, unfulfilled dreams, and the relentless pressure of societal expectations. For David, these revelations were as painful as they were enlightening. The narrative that was emerging was one of a woman who had chosen to step away from a life that no longer served her, a life where her true self had been overshadowed by the roles she was expected to play. David's emotions were a tumultuous blend of relief, sorrow, and an unexpected tenderness. Here was evidence that Elizabeth was not in peril, but rather she had found a measure of freedom in the arms of another. Yet, this newfound freedom came at the cost of the shared history they once cherished. As Mary Ann finished her story, she looked at David with an expression that conveyed both empathy and resignation. She needed to do this, she murmured, for her own salvation. That evening, as David walked home under the pale glow of streetlights, the weight of Mary Ann's words settled over him like a heavy cloak. The encounter was both a confirmation and a revelation, a confirmation of what he had suspected, and a revelation of the depth of Lisbeth's inner conflict. David's heart ached with the realization that the love they had shared was perhaps as much about freedom as it was about union. In that moment, he understood that his quest for truth was not just about piecing together the circumstances of her departure, but also about embracing the complexities of love itself, a love that could transform, even in the face of separation and unexpected choices. In the quiet, somber hours of an overcast afternoon, David's pursuit of the truth reached an unexpected turning point. With the private investigator's steady updates and Marianne's haunting recollections echoing in his mind, he began to see a pattern emerging, one that painted a portrait of Lisbeth not as a victim of a sudden whim, but as a woman who had meticulously charted a course toward a new life. Each detail, every small piece of evidence, resonated with the certainty of an irrevocable choice. The investigator had uncovered several financial records, cryptic messages, and travel itineraries that pointed not to a desperate escape, but to a deliberate plan. Lisbeth had taken steps to establish a new identity, a life replete with carefully chosen confidence and a cautious distance from her old existence. This revelation, as painful as it was enlightening, left David in a state of suspended awe. It wasn't a story of betrayal or heartless abandonment. It was the narrative of a woman in search of freedom, whose quiet desperation had transformed into a determined quest for self-fulfillment. David spent hours poring over the documents that the investigator had shared with him. Each page told a story of calculated decisions, a sequence of events that led her to a new beginning. There was no sign of a violent rupture, no evidence of a tempestuous affair that had swept her away in a fury of passion. Instead, the trail was marked by the slow, deliberate steps of someone who had weighed her options, made plans, and executed them with an almost surgical precision. For David, this discovery was both a balm and a sting. It eased the burning anger that many around him expected, yet it deepened the wound of abandonment. His thoughts turned to the nature of love, a force that could be both nurturing and destructive. How could it be that the woman he had cherished with every fiber of his being had chosen a path that led her away from their shared dreams? The truth, it seemed, was as complex as the emotions that now filled his heart. David began to see that love was not a single immutable entity, but a living, breathing thing that evolved over time, shaped by the choices and circumstances that defined each moment. In a moment of quiet introspection, David realized that his quest for the truth was not merely an investigation into Lisbeth's actions. It was a journey into the very heart of what it meant to care for someone, even when that care required letting go. He recognized that the painful decision to support her from afar was an act of profound empathy, a testament to the depth of his love that transcended the boundaries of conventional expectations. The private investigator's findings confirmed what Marianne had hinted at. The mysterious man in Lisbeth's new life was not a villain, but a symbol of the freedom and complexity that had drawn her away from her old self. This man, whose identity was shrouded in mystery, appeared to embody the promise of a future unburdened by the past. And while David's heart ached at the thought of sharing her love, he also felt an unexpected sense of relief. The evidence suggested that Lisbeth was not in danger, nor was she lost to a life of misery. Instead, she was embracing a chance at renewal, a chance that, in its own way, validated the sacrifices they had both made. As the gray skies began to lighten with the promise of dusk, David sat by his window, the documents spread out before him like the pages of an unfolding epic. The pain of her absence mingled with a newfound clarity, and he understood that sometimes the most courageous act of love was to step back and let the person you cherish find their own path. In that fragile moment of acceptance, David resolved to continue supporting her quest for happiness, even if it meant watching from afar as she embarked on a journey that would forever change both of their lives. In the weeks following the damning revelations, David's collaboration with a private investigator took on a life of its own. What began as a desperate search for his missing wife had morphed into a meticulous investigation, one that peeled back the layers of a life Lisbeth had built on the edge of secrecy. The investigator, a seasoned professional with a keen eye for detail, approached the case not with judgment, but with an unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. Every meeting with the investigator was a quiet session of shared sorrow and reluctant hope. They pored over financial ledgers, travelogues, and cryptic correspondences, each document a silent witness to the choices Lizabeth had made. The investigator's voice was calm and methodical as he recounted his findings: bank transfers to accounts under pseudonyms, hotel bookings in distant cities, and a series of encrypted emails that hinted at a secret network of acquaintances. It was a trail of breadcrumbs left behind by a woman determined to forge a new life while leaving behind the vestiges of her former self. During one particularly long afternoon in a cramped, fluorescent-lit office, the investigators shared a breakthrough. A small, seemingly insignificant detail, a receipt from a quaint bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town, had confirmed that Lizabeth had indeed stayed there not once, but several times over the past few months. This was the turning point that transformed speculation into certainty. David felt a surge of conflicting emotions, a bittersweet mixture of relief that she was safe and an aching sorrow at the realization that she had deliberately distanced herself from him. As the investigator detailed his next steps, surveillance of the bed and breakfast, interviews with staff, and a careful mapping of Lizabeth's known contacts, David began to see the contours of her new life. The woman he had once known was now a mosaic of contradictions, fragile yet resilient, secretive yet open to the possibility of new beginnings. Every piece of evidence, every detail meticulously recorded, underscored the fact that her disappearance had not been an impulsive act of defiance, but a calculated decision born of a need for reinvention. David's emotions were a turbulent storm. He oscillated between a deep-seated yearning for reunion and a growing acceptance of the fact that her path was now separate from his. The investigator's updates, delivered with an air of detached professionalism, became the only link between him and a woman who was no longer entirely his own. With each new revelation, David's sense of loss was tempered by a dawning understanding. Lizabeth's journey was one of self-discovery, a path that she had chosen even as it pained him to acknowledge it. In the quiet of his study, David reflected on the investigator's meticulous work. There was something profoundly moving in the way the investigator had approached the case, a blend of professionalism and empathy that resonated deeply with him. The reports were not merely clinical accounts of facts and figures. They were narratives of a life unfolding in unexpected directions. Through them, David began to glimpse the courage it must have taken for Lizabeth to carve out a space for herself in a world that often demands conformity at the expense of individuality. As winter's chill deepened outside, David made a solemn promise to himself. He would continue to support her, even if it meant living with the bittersweet knowledge that the woman he loved was forging a new identity. The investigator's trail, with all its twists and turns, had become a testament not only to Lizabeth's resilience, but also to David's capacity for unconditional love, a love that could endure even the sharpest pain of separation. In that quiet moment of introspection, as he studied the evidence with tear-filled eyes, David resolved that his journey was far from over. The truth was a winding road, and every step he took, every revelation uncovered, was a tribute to the profound, unyielding power of love. In the solitude of long, reflective nights, David began to experience a quiet transformation that reshaped the contours of his heart. The investigation, the revelations, and the steady cadence of the investigator's updates had all converged to create a metamorphosis within him, a slow, deliberate shift from a state of anguished longing to a place of resigned acceptance. It was as though the raw pain of Lizabeth's disappearance had given way to a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to love and let go. In the early hours of a frigid winter morning, David sat by the window, watching as the pale light of dawn crept over the horizon. The darkness that had once seemed so oppressive was now tinted with the soft hues of possibility. He thought back to the countless nights spent questioning every moment, every shared memory, and slowly realized that the journey he had embarked upon was not solely about searching for Lizabeth. It was a journey into the depths of his own soul. Each piece of evidence, each whispered detail about her new life, forced him to confront the duality of love, its ability to bind hearts together and its power to set them free. David began to explore the nuances of forgiveness, not just of Elizabeth, but also of himself. He recognized that in clinging to an idealized version of their past, he had inadvertently stifled his own growth. With every revelation, the hardened shell of bitterness that had once encased his heart began to crack, revealing layers of empathy and understanding that he had never known existed. This transformation was subtle yet profound, a gradual shift in perspective that allowed him to see her choices through a lens of compassion rather than judgment. Embracing this newfound clarity, David resolved to take actions that honored the woman he had loved, even if that meant relinquishing the hope of reclaiming what was lost. He began to reconnect with old friends, seeking counsel and solace in the shared experiences of love and loss. In these conversations, he found that others too had experienced the paradox of loving someone enough to let them go. Their stories, interwoven with their own threads of sorrow and resilience, reinforced the idea that true love was not possessive but liberating. David's inner transformation also prompted him to revisit the small acts of kindness that had once defined their relationship. He started volunteering at community centers, engaging in activities that nurtured both his spirit and the lives of others. In these moments of quiet service, he found a sense of purpose that transcended the pain of his personal loss. The act of giving, of being present for others in their times of need, filled the emptiness that had once threatened to overwhelm him. In the solitude of his heart, David came to understand that the essence of love was not in holding on tightly, but in having the courage to let go. His journey was no longer about recapturing the past, but about embracing the future with all its uncertainties and possibilities. The process of self-reflection had not only revealed the true nature of Elizabeth's departure, but it also opened his eyes to the resilience that lay dormant within him. The man who once dwelled in sorrow was now beginning to see that every ending was also the promise of a new beginning, a chance to redefine love in its most honest, unselfish form. As the days grew longer and the winter slowly yielded to the gentle embrace of spring, David found himself smiling at the small wonders of life, the warmth of the sun on his face, the laughter of a stranger, the delicate bloom of a flower breaking through the frost. Each moment was a quiet affirmation that healing was possible, that even in the wake of heartbreak, there could be hope. And so, with a heart that had been both scarred and mended, David stepped forward into a future that was as uncertain as it was promising, forever changed by the truth that true love endures, even when it demands the ultimate act of letting go. With each passing day, the investigation into Elizabeth's new life unfolded, like a carefully guarded secret slowly revealed to a patient observer. David's newfound clarity and inner transformation had brought him to a place where he could view her choices not as a betrayal, but as a necessary evolution of her own spirit. The private investigator's diligent work had begun to sketch out the contours of a life that Elizabeth had built for herself, one that was marked by cautious optimism, unexpected friendships, and a sense of liberation that both intrigued and pained David. Late one afternoon, David received a call that confirmed the investigator's latest findings. Elizabeth was indeed living in a modest apartment in a quiet part of town, a place that radiated a sense of calm and simplicity. The apartment, as described in the report, was adorned with small touches of elegance. Hand-painted canvases, carefully arranged bouquets of fresh flowers, and personal mementos that suggested a journey of self-expression. It was a stark contrast to the life David had known, a life of shared dreams and mutual familiarity. This new existence, while entirely separate from his own, held the promise of healing for a woman who had once been the center of his universe. Curiosity mixed with a lingering tenderness as David began to visit the areas mentioned in the investigator's report. He walked the quiet streets, observing the local community and noting the subtle signs of a new beginning. Every corner of that neighborhood spoke of hope, a place where every face he passed seemed to carry a story of reinvention and renewal. In the gentle murmur of everyday life, David sensed that Elizabeth had found something she had long been searching for, a quiet sense of belonging that he had never been able to provide. though the discovery of her new life stirred a complex array of emotions. David's transformation allowed him to feel only a measured sadness, rather than the searing pain of betrayal. He knew that her departure was not a rejection of their past, but rather an affirmation of her need to explore who she was beyond the roles assigned to her by their shared history. The investigator's detailed report had painted a picture of a woman who was vibrant and hopeful, someone who had embraced change rather than resisted it. David began to reach out to mutual acquaintances, piecing together more fragments of her current existence. There were quiet testimonials of a gentle soul who had learned to smile again, who had discovered solace in the arts, and who had formed connections that enriched her spirit. It was clear that Elizabeth was not isolated or in danger. Instead, she was blossoming in an environment that nurtured her growth. For David, this was a revelation that challenged the traditional notions of heartbreak. The woman he had loved was no longer confined by the boundaries of a single narrative. She was evolving, and that evolution, though painful to witness, was a testament to her inner strength. In a moment of introspection, David acknowledged that by ensuring her safety and well-being, he was embracing the true meaning of love, a love that does not demand possession, but rather cherishes the happiness of the other, even from afar. The sense of closure that came from this understanding was both liberating and profoundly bittersweet. As he walked back home that evening, under a sky painted with the hues of twilight, David felt a quiet resolve settle in his heart. His mission had never been to reclaim the past, but to honor a woman who had taught him that love, in its truest form, is about empowering someone to be their most authentic self, even if that means they must walk a different path. Just as the contours of Elizabeth's new life began to emerge, another figure cast a long, enigmatic shadow over the narrative, a mysterious man who had become an integral part of her reimagined existence. The private investigator's findings introduced David to the presence of this man, whose identity was shrouded in subtle hints and quiet whispers among those who knew Elizabeth in her new circles. His name was mentioned only in hushed tones, as if speaking it aloud might unravel the delicate tapestry of a life that had been so painstakingly rebuilt. David found himself grappling with a swirl of emotions at the thought of this stranger. The man was described as both charismatic and elusive, a person whose very presence seemed to embody the promise of new beginnings. According to accounts gathered by the investigator, he had been a constant companion to Elizabeth during some of her most transformative moments. Witnesses recalled instances of quiet conversations in shadowed corners of cozy cafes, moments when the two shared laughter and understanding that transcended words. Yet for David, the idea of sharing her love with someone else was a bitter pill to swallow. In an effort to better understand this mysterious figure, David began to delve deeper into the investigator's records. The evidence suggested that the man was not a force of destruction, but rather a catalyst for change, a person who had quietly supported Elizabeth's journey of self-discovery. His influence was evident in the subtle ways Elizabeth's demeanor had shifted, in the newfound confidence that colored her actions. Yet, even as David acknowledged these facts, the presence of this man stirred a latent sense of jealousy that he had long thought buried beneath the ashes of his own heartbreak. Despite the turmoil, David resolved to confront his emotions with the same quiet determination that had guided his investigation from the start. He recognized that the true challenge lay not in erasing the memories of what once was, but an understanding that the evolution of love was not a zero-sum game. The mysterious man, though an unexpected part of the picture, represented something beyond rivalry, a symbol of the freedom and complexity that Elizabeth had embraced. David saw in him a mirror of the very qualities that had once drawn him to his wife, a hunger for authenticity, an unwavering belief in the possibility of change, and the courage to pursue a future unburdened by the weight of the past. In a series of quiet, introspective evenings, David began to piece together the characteristics of this man. He learned that he was a creative spirit, someone who had found solace in art and music, and who had become a silent pillar in Elizabeth's new life. As the investigators' reports grew more detailed, the narrative of this enigmatic figure became clearer, a narrative that was as much about support and empathy as it was about companionship. David's own transformation allowed him to view these developments with a tempered heart. Instead of succumbing to a maelstrom of anger, he chose to see the man as a necessary part of Elizabeth's journey, a companion who had helped her unlock parts of herself that had long remained dormant. This understanding, while not erasing the sting of loss, brought a measure of closure. David's feelings, though still tender and raw, began to settle into a quiet acceptance. In the end, the mysterious man was not a rival to be vanquished, but a testament to the fact that love could take many forms, each equally valuable and transformative. As David contemplated this, he resolved to continue his path, not to reclaim what was lost, but to honor the evolution of a woman who had taught him that the true essence of love lies in the freedom to be oneself. One crisp, clear morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through a thin veil of mist, David sat at his desk with trembling hands and a heart full of conflicting emotions. After months of relentless searching and soul-searching, he had reached a crossroads, a moment when the path before him diverged into two distinct directions, one leading back to the familiar echoes of the past, and the other toward an uncertain future marked by acceptance and transformation. With a deep, steadying breath, David decided to bridge that gap with a single, carefully crafted letter addressed to Elizabeth. The letter was not written in anger or resentment. Instead, it was a gentle outpouring of his innermost thoughts, a raw, unfiltered expression of his enduring love and the bittersweet pain of letting go. Every word was chosen with care, every sentence a delicate balance between longing and the need for closure. In it, David recounted the memories that had shaped their lives, the shared laughter and whispered secrets that had once bound them together. He spoke of the days filled with hope and dreams, and of the quiet nights when the weight of her absence had threatened to overwhelm him. Yet, interwoven with these memories was an acknowledgement of the truth he had come to accept, a truth that Elizabeth had chosen a different path, one that promised her the freedom to explore her own identity. David explained that his decision to hire the private investigator, his careful examination of every clue, and even the resolve to understand the role of the mysterious man in her life were not acts of revenge, but rather the expression of a love so deep that it sought nothing more than her safety and happiness. His words carried an undercurrent of compassion and a desire for reconciliation, not with the past that had been, but with the future that lay before her. In the letter, David also bared his own transformation. He shared how the journey had forced him to confront his own shortcomings, to acknowledge that sometimes love requires the courage to let go. He wrote about the nights spent poring over old photographs, the solitary walks in the fading light of day, and the slow, painful process of learning to accept that a love so profound could endure even in separation. There was an honesty in his words that was both heartbreaking and liberating, a testament to the fact that true love is never about possession, but about the freedom to be oneself. As the ink dried on the final page, David felt a quiet resolve settle over him. Sending the letter was an act of vulnerability, a bridge extended across the chasm that had grown between them. It was a silent prayer that Elizabeth would understand, that she might feel the echo of his love in every carefully chosen word. Though he knew the letter might never reach her, or if it did, that it might not alter the course of her newfound life, the act itself was enough. It was a farewell to the past and an acceptance of the present, a declaration that he would continue to care for her, even from afar. That day, as David stepped out into the brisk morning air, the weight of his loss felt a little lighter. In the act of writing and sending the letter, he had taken the first true step toward healing. It was a moment of fragile hope, a hope that, in embracing the reality of her choices, he might also find a path toward his own redemption. And so, with a heart both heavy and hopeful, David carried on, knowing that sometimes the most courageous act of love is to send a message of compassion across the divide, even when it means accepting that some dreams are meant to live only in memory. In the weeks that followed the sending of that heartfelt letter, David felt an unexpected shift within himself, a subtle realignment of his inner compass that guided him toward redemption. Every day, he encountered the lingering echoes of his past with Elizabeth, Yet these reminders no longer carried the sting of betrayal. Instead, they resonated with a deeper understanding of the impermanence of life's narratives and the inherent complexity of human relationships. The knowledge that Elizabeth had embarked on a journey of self-discovery, aided by a mysterious companion, allowed David to embrace the present with a newfound sense of clarity. David began to reconnect with old passions that he had long set aside. He revisited his love for painting, a talent that had been overshadowed by the demands of daily life and the weight of grief. With each brushstroke, he poured out the emotions that had long been locked within his heart: pain, love, acceptance, and hope. The canvas became a silent diary of his transformation, capturing the hues of loss and the vibrant colors of rebirth. In these quiet moments of artistic expression, David found a sanctuary, a place where the complexities of his emotions could be laid bare without judgment. Friends and acquaintances noticed the change in him. His once hollow eyes now held a glimmer of resilience, a determination to rebuild his life brick by tender brick. David began to engage more openly with those around him, sharing his journey, and in doing so, discovering that many had faced similar crossroads in their own lives. The stories they exchanged were tinged with both sorrow and a bittersweet celebration of growth, a mutual recognition that life's twists and turns often lead to unexpected forms of redemption. As spring blossomed into a season of renewal, David decided to take a walk along the river that had once been a favorite spot for quiet reflection with Elizabeth. The gentle murmur of the water, the soft rustle of the budding leaves, and the distant laughter of children all served as reminders that life moved forward relentlessly. Standing at the edge of the river, David allowed the cool current to wash over his feet, a symbolic cleansing of the past. In that moment, he realized that while the chapters of their shared history would always be a part of him, he could choose to step into the future unburdened by regret. At home, amidst the scattered canvases and the soft strains of music that filled the rooms, David decided to embrace the uncertainty of tomorrow. He revisited the memories of his early days with Elizabeth, not with longing for what was lost, but with gratitude for the love they had shared. That gratitude, he understood, was a precious gift, one that allowed him to see beauty in imperfection and strength in vulnerability. While the mystery of Elizabeth's new life and the presence of the enigmatic man still loomed in the background of his thoughts, David no longer viewed them as sources of pain. Instead, they had become symbols of the myriad ways in which love could evolve. The act of caring for someone even from afar was not an act of martyrdom, but an affirmation of a deeper truth: that true love is boundless, transcending the confines of possession and expectation. In the twilight of that day, as the sky blushed with the soft glow of dusk, David found himself at peace with the past and ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. His journey had taken him through the darkest corridors of loss and the bright, hopeful avenues of self-discovery. And as he looked out at the horizon, he knew that every ending was but a precursor to a new beginning, a testament to the enduring, transformative power of love. As summer crept in, heralding a season of warmth and possibility, David stood at the threshold of a new chapter, a life forever altered by the journey of loss, discovery, and redemption. The days of searching, of grappling with the enigma of Elizabeth's departure, had left him with scars and wisdom in equal measure. Yet in the quiet moments of reflection, he realized that every step had brought him closer to a profound understanding of what it means to love unconditionally. David's days had become filled with quiet rituals: a morning coffee by the window, leisurely walks in the park, and afternoons spent immersed in the solace of creative pursuits. These activities, once trivial in the shadow of grief, had become the building blocks of a renewed existence. The man who once lived in the echoes of a shared past was now learning to embrace the vibrant unpredictability of the present. He had come to accept that true love is not defined by constant proximity, but by the willingness to let the other person live freely, even if that freedom meant walking a different path. One serene evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, David found himself reflecting on the many facets of his journey. He thought of Elizabeth, whose choices had set in motion a cascade of events that ultimately led him to a deeper understanding of himself. The mysterious man, the whispered secrets of her new life, the bittersweet letters, and the silent acknowledgments of love. All of these had coalesced into a symphony of emotions that resonated with a timeless truth: that love endures, even when it forces us to redefine our notions of happiness and fulfillment. In the quiet sanctuary of his study, surrounded by the artifacts of his past and the fresh canvases of his future, David allowed himself to smile at the memories that once were, and to welcome the uncertain beauty of what might be. The days of relentless searching had transformed into a period of gentle acceptance. Every tear shed, every moment of despair, had eventually given way to a resilience that now shone through in the soft lines of his smile and the steady rhythm of his heart. In the end, David's journey was not about reclaiming what had been lost, but about honoring the transformative power of love, the kind that can let go without losing itself, that can cherish the happiness of another even when it comes at the cost of personal pain. As twilight settled over the city, David penned one final thought in a journal that had borne witness to his deepest emotions. Love is the art of letting go and still holding on to the memories that shape us. In that final embrace of acceptance, David realized that his story, though marked by sorrow, was also filled with moments of beauty, growth, and unexpected joy. The legacy of his love for Elizabeth would forever be a part of him, a reminder that even in the midst of heartbreak, there lies a profound strength, a quiet resolve to move forward with grace. And so, as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, David stepped into the future with a heart unburdened by regret, carrying with him the timeless truth that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let someone go, so that they might find their own way to happiness.